Welcome to the 700 Club. Republicans have won the most expensive congressional election in history. Democrats from across the country spent more than $30 million to take away a seat in Georgia, but it still wasn't enough.
It's a victory for the White House as well, as Democrats made the race a referendum on President Trump. Caitlin Burke brings us the story.
A boost for the Trump base coming out of Georgia Tuesday night, as Republican Karen Handel kept another House seat firmly in the hands of the GOP.
Tonight's victory, it's for you, and it's for every single citizen in the 6th District. It's for every single person with a dream. And a special thanks to the President of the United States of America.
The battle to win the seat, left vacant by Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, smashed House race spending records. Democrats, including many from outside Georgia, along with Republicans, poured more than $50 million into the campaign. Attack ads flooded the airwaves of the Atlanta suburbs.
Jon Ossoff and his liberal allies have...
Democratic candidate Jon Ossoff ran as a moderate, with some saying he was trying to look like a Republican. Democrats saw an opening for a win in the district after Trump only won its support in the presidential election by 1.5%.
So this is not the outcome any of us were hoping for. But this is the beginning of something much bigger than us.
Democrats have been trying to win a special election since their loss in the race for the White House, hoping to show that the public is turning against the Trump administration. So far, they've failed in every attempt. President Trump was quick to react to Handel's victory, tweeting, "Things are looking great for Karen H." House Speaker Paul Ryan said in a statement, quote, "Democrats from coast to coast threw everything they had at this race, and Karen would not be defeated." Special elections aren't necessarily good predictors of the following year's congressional elections, but after yet another disappointment for Democrats, it may be time for soul-searching and finger-pointing. Heading into the 2018 midterm elections, Democrats need to pick up 24 House seats to take back the majority. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Well, it's now 4-0 for President Trump in these special elections. He keeps on winning, and it looks like we're going to have a lot of blockbuster elections coming up. It seems like the cycle never ends, but here we are once again in yet another election cycle. Well, in other news, the controversial winner of a previous special congressional election is being sworn into office today. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Montana's Greg Gianforte made national headlines after a physical altercation with a reporter at the end of his campaign, raising questions about his suitability for office. So our Abigail Robertson traveled to the Big Sky country to find out what Montanans think of their new congressman.
On May 24th, the day before Montana voters went to the polls, it looked like smooth sailing for Greg Gianforte to win the state's sole congressional seat. And then...
I'm sick and tired of you guys. The last time that came in here, you did the same thing.
Gianforte still won the election by 6%, with about 37% of eligible voters casting their ballots before the incident occurred. Prior to running for office, he was well known around the state as a successful businessman, generous philanthropist, and strong Christian, which made his actions shocking to many who know him well.
We were shocked. There are many political candidates in Montana who, if you heard a story like that, you wouldn't be surprised that it happened. But with Greg, we were all surprised because it's simply out of character for him.
Greg I've known for almost 20 years. That's just not what I've ever seen of him.
When Pastor Hughes first heard about the incident, he thought it was a hoax. And then he saw an email from Gianforte saying an unfortunate event took place and he wanted to talk.
He called and he just, I think one of his first comments was, "Brian, you know, as my pastor, I just want you to know I did not glorify God in my actions, but I sure hope to and long to glorify God in my response going forward."
What do you think happened a couple weeks ago?
I think what happened was, after 22 months of campaigning for governor and then for congressman, I think the whole pressure, all of the feeling, you know, man, I've been dragged through the mud and all of that, I think he just snapped. And he obviously regrets it immensely.
Hughes says he's prayed with Gianforte a few times about how to best handle the situation.
I really was confident that Greg would take responsibility, take ownership, and do whatever he had to do to make things right and seek to honor the Lord in it and moving forward.
He believes supporters should acknowledge what happened was unacceptable, but he can still be forgiven.
Unfortunately, there were some in the state who, you know, on social media who were almost excusing or justifying, saying, well, you know, the press does this and they got what they deserved, and so our elders felt like, no, we don't want anyone to assume that's our attitude toward it, nor is it Greg's.
While there were reports of some early voters trying to change their vote, many still have confidence in Gianforte. In downtown Bozeman, several people were reluctant to speak on camera, but say they still support him. And others say they have just as many questions of the media as they do of Gianforte.
I'm not sure how much of it was made up and how much of it wasn't, you know, but you know, I feel like it was over-exaggerated by the press a tiny bit.
I think these politicians and political figures get sort of harassed by the press sometimes, so it's not entirely shocking, but still pretty, I mean, a shameful thing.
There is a diminished effect of the media pursuing public figures as much as they do. Fewer and fewer people are going to get involved.
The jury's still out on whether he can move past this.
I don't think Montana's going to approve of how he works in the House, and I don't think Montana approved of how he behaved the last week of his campaign.
Gianforte has about 16 months to prove himself as a congressman and try to put this incident behind him before he's up for re-election in 2018. Reporting from Montana, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thanks, Abigail. The Prime Minister of Belgium says a terrorist attack his country thwarted could have led to serious injuries. A soldier shot and killed a suspect after a small explosion at a busy train station in Brussels. It was the latest in a week of attacks in capitals across Europe. Authorities found a suitcase bomb filled with gas bottles and nails. One witness described the man as very agitated, saying he was yelling about jihadists and shouted Allahu Akbar, which is Arabic for God is great. Then he blew up something on a baggage trolley. The 36-year-old suspect was a Moroccan citizen who lived in Brussels. Reuters reports he had not been suspected of possible militant links. Well, President Trump's son-in-law, White House senior advisor Jared Kushner, arrives in Israel today. He joins an official U.S. negotiator for meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the visit is the latest attempt to forge a peace agreement between the Israelis and Palestinians.
Listening and learning from Israelis and Palestinians. That's what Israel's defense minister says the Trump administration is doing.
They're proceeding cautiously, as should be, listening to all parties in the region, trying to find out what's realistic, as opposed to the top-down tactics of the Obama administration, which sought to impose a preconceived notion on Israel in particular and on the Palestinians as well.
Trump's recent Middle East visit shows he wants to include Middle East Sunni nations in a regional peace plan, yet it might have limitations.
Clearly the atmospherics in the region have improved, and the Israelis and the Saudis in particular have a common enemy in Iran. Is that going to play into Palestinian and Israeli negotiations in the way many people are hoping? I'm not sure.
David Weinberg sees a big difference between the Trump and Obama administrations.
The Obama administration took to hectoring Israel all the time, berating Israel. Trump has taken a different approach, work with Israel, see what's realistic, and time to give the Palestinians a dose of reality as well.
Part of that reality included reports President Trump shouted at Abbas in their recent meeting in Bethlehem. The president reportedly accused the PA leader of lying to him at the White House when he said the Palestinians are raising their children to live in peace with Israel, while official Palestinian media shows just the opposite. A White House official cautioned that an historic peace agreement would take time, so expect more visits here to Israel by Middle East negotiators Kushner and Greenblatt. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Gordon, this has been an elusive deal for many. Do you think President Trump will have a better shot at it?
Well, the Bible says peace, peace, and there is no peace. You look at it and say, I hope they can get something done. You know, you go back to Khartoum, and that was the Arab conference right after the Six-Day War, and the Arab nations all came up with the famous 3 no's: no negotiation with Israel, no peace with Israel, and you just say, can it happen with the Palestinian Authority? Here you have a culture that is bent on destroying Israel. They're bent on a right of return, and they're not just talking about the West Bank. They're not talking about just East Jerusalem. They're talking about Jaffa. They're talking about Haifa. They're talking about Tel Aviv. So they want to wipe Israel off the map. That's what they've been taught since they were young. They have streets named after terrorists. They have city squares named after terrorists. They glorify them as martyrs for the faith. How can you ever get to a peace agreement with them? But many administrations have tried. We'll see if on this one. I doubt they'll come to some very key terms. What about the Temple Mount? And what about the right of return? Those two things will make any peace agreement elusive. If you want to understand today's headlines, you need to get the history, and we've made it easy for you. We have a documentary on the Six-Day War called In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem. And it's the authentic history. There's no made-up dialogue here. It's all based on the actual recollections of the soldiers who participated in the battle, who stood on the Temple Mount and said to the world, the Temple Mount is in our hands. When you understand what happened, particularly from 1948 to 1967, you'll understand today's headlines. I want you to have it. It's yours for a gift of $15. All you have to do is call us, 1-800-700-7000, or you can go to cbn.com.